Do you want to better understand your thyroid results? Well, in this video, we've got some actual patient results here we're going to go over so you can better understand what your test results mean. Hi, my name is Dr. Brady Hurst. I'm the clinical director here at TrueHealthLabs.com, and today we've got some thyroid results, some actual results from a patient. And we want to go over these because it may not be as cut and clear as you may think. So let's dive in. All right, so here are the test results from an actual patient here. We've just covered up the personal information. Now, just to tell you, you might want to watch this video over several times because we're going to go over some pretty detailed information. Some of it can be confusing, so just remember to rewatch it as you need to. Here is Miss Jane Doe's test results. We need to first go over what the thyroid gland does. So the thyroid gland produces thyroid hormone, and that hormone, one of its big job is to maintain or regulate our metabolism. That is how our body burns energy. And so looking at the hormones can help understand what some of these symptoms like severe fatigue, where it might be coming from. So the thyroid gland is a gland that sits about right here. Now, the brain tells the thyroid gland to either produce more thyroid hormone or less, depending on what the levels are. And so, as we see on these results, you see that these hormones are called T3 and T4. Now, the thyroid gland mainly makes T4. T4 is an inactive thyroid hormone. It's the storage part of the thyroid hormone. And so, what that does is it stores in our tissues all around our body, and then when our body needs it to make energy, it taps in and our body converts it from T4 into T3. And then our bodies can use that to change the metabolism of our cells. Now, if that doesn't work right, then the energy isn't there. You'll see major fatigue among some other symptoms, because we have to remember that the thyroid hormones control the energy of all our cells, and so we'll see a slowdown of a lot of things. So we might see a slowdown of the intestinal tract, so there might be GI or gut type symptoms going on, bloatedness, constipation, things like that. And so everything slows down. Let's dive into these results. And so the first marker here, the T3 uptake. This helps us understand how well the body is utilizing T3, again, the active thyroid hormone. So if the body's struggling here with Jane, it can tell us if it's thirsty, if you will, for more thyroid hormone, or if it's satisfied and it doesn't need to absorb anymore. 27% is pretty good. Now, something you'll notice as we're going over these is that there is a difference between normal and optimal. So reference ranges are developed based on previous test results from the lab. And so what we'll typically see over time as people, especially with thyroid, get worse and worse, we'll see these reference ranges change and change and change. And so the new normal might be today's sick, if you will. So we need to step out of that and look at these test results from a standpoint of, okay, what's normal, but what's optimal, okay? And so we'll dive into that too. So we see T3 uptake's okay. T4, so T4 again is the thyroid gland producing, it's the major hormone of T4. It's inactive, but it stores in our body for later. So with T4, we see at 6.3. That's pretty good. I would say it's still in the optimal range. From there, we go to T3, the T4 index, which is just a calculation of what's called the free T4. I really don't use this because we always run the free T4 directly. So the T4 index, it's just there because it is just part of the panel. It's always run. The next one, the TSH here, this is the one that you probably, if you've had thyroid issues or you've been to the doctor, this is the one that they run most often. Because if this is out of range, if it's high, that means you're in a hypothyroid type state, and that's all that's needed to give thyroid replacement hormone. And so you'll see we run a lot of markers here because thyroid is not just cut and dry. And if you're wanting to recover from a hypothyroid type situation and you don't just want to rely on thyroid replacement hormones, that's the reason why all these other markers are run. But your standard doc, the doc in the box down the street, this is what they're going to use only. It is still a great marker, but it can be limited, and I'll show you why on these results. So we see at 1.7. Now, optimal where we like to see it is around 1.8. So this is actually really good TSH. Now, TSH is a hormone that is secreted from the brain to tell the thyroid gland either to produce more or less thyroid hormone. So when we see it really high, that means the brain is screaming at the thyroid, produce more, produce more, produce more. And if it's constantly high, well, the thyroid gland's not listening, and we have to figure out why, which these test results can help figure that out. Because thyroid disorders, they're not cut and dry. There's different flavors. We see 1.78, we like that. The calcium was run here because we also run vitamin D. Vitamin D is not part of this complete thyroid panel, but it's highly suggested to add it on because of what we're about to show you. Calcium looks pretty good. Let's move on to the free T4. The free T4 and the free versions of these hormones are the hormone that acts on the body, basically. And so when hormones travel around the body, they need to be inside taxis, if you will. They need to be able to travel so they don't accidentally activate themselves along the way. They want to get to where they're going and then get out of the taxis. And so the total T3 and T4, those are the ones inside the taxi for the most part. And then the free T3 and free 4 are the ones that are outside the taxi that are available to get the job done. Okay, so we want to see if these hormone levels are good. At 1.0 for the free T4, that's pretty good. Low optimal, it's still within the range. Typically like to see a little bit higher than that, about 1.2, 1.3. That would seem to be pretty good. The free T4 at 2.8, that's pretty solid too. Still a little low optimal. But we have to remember Jane here is experiencing fatigue, right? So the next marker here, the total T3. Again, the total, that's the T3 that's inside those taxis. We see at 112, that's pretty solid. One of the more common things, if someone's still having low thyroid type symptoms, but these are looking pretty good, the most common thing that we see is a free T4 and free T3 abnormality. We see those are kind of on the lower end. But one of the more common things is that we'll see is that T4, the free T4 may be elevated and the T3 might be low. And this is one of the more common patterns that we see. Because what happens is that, like we said before, T4, the inactive hormone, needs to be converted into the active T3. And so this mainly happens in the liver. And it is highly what's called selenium dependent. And selenium is a mineral that our body uses to make that transformation happen. So a lot of times what we'll see is that there will be a selenium deficiency going on, keeping that from happening. And you get all these thyroid symptoms, even though TSH is fine, but because the T4 tells the brain whether to increase or decrease the TSH. And so when the T4 is fine or at okay levels, TSH will look fine. Everything, your doc in the box will be like, hey, everything's normal, just go get some more sleep. And so what we'll see here is that a lot of times it's the conversion that's the issue. Now, there's not a big conversion issue going on here on these results, but it's very common. So look at your test results to see, hey, is there a normal or higher T4 and then a much lower T3? That's usually what's happening. Next marker we have here is reverse T3. Now, reverse T3 is the break. So reverse T3 is inactive, it doesn't do anything. However, it does hook onto the cells to where normal T3 would have hooked onto. It blocks it. And the body does this for a good reason, because we don't want to we don't want to send metabolism off the roof, off the charts. We want to keep things stable. So what the body will do is it will convert a lot of the T4 into reverse T3. So it just hangs out. However, an interesting part about reverse T3 is that it can be converted back into active T3. And it's our good little bacteria in our gut that does that. And so what can happen if you're struggling to produce more T3 or that conversion isn't working quite right? A lot of times looking at the intestinal tract and the good bacteria, this is called your microbiome, looking at the good bacteria is really helpful, because if there's something wrong there or an imbalance, then that could increase that reverse T3 or keep reverse T3 from going back into T3. So that could help out tremendously. And of course we have microbiome testing, and I'll put that in the link to that in the description. So at 10, we're looking pretty good here. Just on a side note, there's a good ratio. We like to see a good 10-to-1 ratio reverse T3 to free T3, because that'll show us what that conversion is looking like, if it's a little too much or too low. So that ratio looks good here. So here we go. So here's the elephant in the room on these test results, is that we have, these are called your thyroid antibodies. Now, antibodies, as we know, are produced by the immune system, and they're used to tag different things, usually bacteria and viruses and things like that, so the immune system can go attack it. Well, what can happen is that our immune system can create antibodies to our thyroid gland and start to attack it too. So this is what we're seeing here. So there's two main antibodies, the thyroid globulin antibodies, which here are negative, and then the thyroid perioxidase antibodies, which are really high at 148. Now take a look at your results. If your thyroid test results don't have thyroid antibodies on it, get them done. It's one of the more common reasons for thyroid disorders, but it is rarely tested for, because from a traditional medical standpoint, it doesn't change the treatment. You still get thyroid hormone replacement. Or if it's bad enough, you'll get immune system suppressants to bring these antibodies down. Of course, we want to change our lifestyle and what we're doing that might be creating these antibody elevations. We want to change those first, because there's a lot that can be done there. So thyroid antibodies are high. Thyroid perioxidase is an enzyme. Enzymes basically make chemical reactions happen. And what's happening here is the immune system goes in there and attacks it. And so a lot of times this chemical reaction can, over time, become weak. The thyroid gland can be damaged. But what we're seeing here, if you look at all these other thyroid markers, is that everything's looking pretty good. So the thyroid gland is still operating right now, but what about 10 years from now, 15 years from now? What's that going to look like if these antibodies aren't taken care of? It's not going to be looking good. So moving on from here, we have some iron markers here. And the reason this isn't part of the Complete Thyroid Panel, but it's still important if you're trying to figure out why the fatigue is there. Because understanding how your body processes iron is important, because it's needed in order for oxygen to hook onto your red blood cells. So if you don't have good oxygen within your red blood cells, then you're going to be fatigued, because oxygen is needed to produce energy. So for this patient, she added on this iron panel to rule that out. Everything looks pretty good for her iron profile here. So we're gonna move on. The last marker that was run on here, this is another one that needs to be added on, the vitamin D. Now vitamin D is extremely important, and it plays a really good role in what's happening to Jane here, is that at 27, that's really low. And because her thyroid antibodies are elevated, that's extremely low. So vitamin D, one of its main functions is to keep our immune systems from becoming confused. What I mean by that is that when when our immune system starts attacking normal, healthy tissue like the thyroid gland, it shouldn't be doing that. And a lot of times a trigger and a promoter is because there's low vitamin D levels. Without vitamin D, the immune system will say, well, think that the thyroid gland is a foreign invader when it's not. And so we see that she has, at 27, that's really low. Well, we see that reference range, it's 30 to 100. But there's a lot of literature to say that having a level of 30 is not enough. Now, what this means is that at 30 is, from a traditional standpoint, is that that's usually the level to where that vitamin D deficiency symptoms usually don't show up from 30 and higher. But of course we want to be optimized. We don't just want to say, hey, I'm at 30, I'm good, I don't have low vitamin D symptoms. So for someone with high antibodies like that, we're typically shooting for around 50 to 60. That's where the range we want to stay in, because that's going to give enough vitamin D to help shut down that confusion of the immune system. So for her at 27, really low. We want to get that up. That will actually help lower those antibodies over time as the immune system comes back online, if you will. This low level was probably a trigger or a promoter of what's going on. But for now, the thyroid gland looks good. But again, 10, 15 years from now, it may be a totally different story. And once that thyroid gland is damaged, it can be permanently damaged. And that's where thyroid hormone replacement definitely has to come in when the thyroid gland is damaged. Here we go. So there's some takeaways here. Always get a complete thyroid panel. If you go to your doc and you're fatigued and they run a TSH and T4, which is usually the only thing they do, stop them and be like, hey, let's add on the rest of these markers. And if they don't, that's the reason why we have this service. So TrueHealthLabs.com allows you to order laboratory tests yourself. And because we know the importance of having all these markers and having all the information together, so there's less guesswork. You can say, all right, here's what's going on, let's approach it from there. We have those tests provided for you. And if there's any tests that we may not have gone over here, but that you want, just let us know. We can get pretty much any laboratory test available. If this video helped you, it's important to share, to like, to comment on this video, and subscribe to our channel and click the little bell notification. That'll let you know when we're going to be putting out new videos about lab tests. If there's any labs you want us to go over, what you can do in the description below, we'll have a link where you can sign up and basically submit what you want us to go over, and we'll go over your lab results. And follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram. That's when we're going to notify everyone about, hey, these are the labs we're going to go over, and tune in. We'll even do some live ones, and that way we can also have a Q&A and answer some questions. Again, this is Dr. Brady Hurst from TrueHealthLabs.com. And we'll see you next time.